Shortly after becoming a Christian in my early 20s, I was asked by a friend of mine who is very skeptical by nature. He said, "Why? How could you become a Christian?" And then he finished his thought off by saying something that I'll never forget. He said, "I thought you were smarter than that."
Say what?
What could I say to that? It seemed to me that my friend was implying that I had been deceived or duped into believing something that was only for people of lesser intelligence. The implication was that people with a higher degree of intelligence should be able to easily reason that there's no such thing as God. So then what happened to me? How could I have fallen into the foolish trap of believing in God and becoming a Christian? Well, up until I became a Christian, I would have described myself as a skeptic. I was and remain someone who doesn't easily buy into different ideas or philosophies. I'm someone who needs proof before I accept something strong enough to claim that I would believe in it. I'm someone who believes that proof is so important. If I'm going to believe or accept anything as true, then I need proof or solid evidence that backs it up. Because without proof or solid evidence, then I am seriously reluctant to accept anything as true or fact. And that goes for anything to do with religion or spiritual beliefs as well. So here I am today, someone who professes to be a believer and follower of Jesus Christ. And if this is true, then that means that I have found the proof that I needed that fully convinced me that God is real, and that Jesus Christ and his death on the cross and resurrection from the grave is also real. So then what is the proof? Because after all, skeptics want to know the proof. As a matter of fact, very recently, a guy with a very cool motorcycle challenged me. He said, "Prove it. Prove it that your God is real." And now, if there's anything that I've learned in all my time since becoming a Christ follower, it's that the proof that I need to believe in God is very likely not the proof that someone else is going to need for them to believe in God. Now, does this mean that I don't believe that there is adequate evidence or proof out there in the world that speaks to the credibility of Jesus being God in the flesh? No! Not at all. I fully believe that there is abundant, solid, reputable evidence that can be easily accessed by anyone. And this evidence is very hard to dismiss in anyone who is able to remain impartial and open-minded enough and set aside any preconceived biases. But again, if I've learned anything in the time since becoming a Christ follower, I've learned that this evidence, as good and reputable as it may be, in the eyes of skeptics, it's still simply not good enough. Skeptics are still looking for something more. Remaining open and impartial to the evidence is challenging for everyone because it challenges our way of thinking, which can be difficult, especially when we're already pretty set in our own ways. And people of faith are not immune to this. I've known Christians and other people of various faith groups who will not entertain evidence that challenges their way of thinking. But why? Why would you fear a challenge to your way of thinking unless maybe you're worried that your beliefs may not be as solid as you thought they were? If what we claim to believe is actually true, then I think that we should be able to listen to other opinions and review all the evidence available in order to be better aware and educated on all sides of any argument or discussion. In doing so, we may even find that our beliefs are made stronger in the process. Or we may find that the pursuit of truth leads us in new and different directions. But if our pursuit for the truth is real, then we shouldn't be afraid to test or challenge or search and seek until we've found the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help us God, if you believe in him. So to explore this idea further, then why would people claiming to want real proof, claiming to want to know the truth, then be so quick to dismiss good evidence? That is, if they'll give any real time to pursuing the evidence at all. I believe this is because in many cases, their search for truth and the questions they have goes far deeper than just needing proof or evidence. They want answers to life's difficult questions. As a Christ follower who shares his faith with others, and as a pastor to a local church, I've had many first-hand conversations with people who are asking some pretty major questions that deserve an answer. I've heard people say, if God is real, then why did he let me suffer such horrendous abuse? If God is real, then why does he allow any suffering in this world at all? If God is real, then why doesn't he just settle the debate surrounding his existence once and for all and show himself to us? These are all great questions, real questions that deserve real answers. But I feel the truth is that these are questions that only God himself can answer. So to find the answers to these questions, I believe one has to be willing to go to God directly. But a lot of the time, and I think understandably, people looking for these answers aren't willing to speak or pray or go to God directly, probably because they have difficulty believing that he's there. So instead, they'll go to his people, professed Christians, or people of various faith groups, looking to them for these answers. And then with all that anger and the frustration that they feel towards these unresolved questions they have, they then approach these people of faith with hostility or anger, directing anger that they might be holding against God towards his people. And in my experience, given our human nature, people aren't equipped to be able to handle anger and hostility directed at them nearly as well as God is. So given this reality, I believe this is why we see such hostile, never-ending debates and fighting and wars rather than seeing peaceful solutions, even if the solution is to simply agree to disagree. And of course, it's not only unbelievers or people with real questions who are hostile. There will always be Christians and people of various faiths that will love to debate, fight, and argue their own opinions on these matters. And in my opinion, for whatever that's worth, this leads to no good as well. Fighting and arguing and debating rarely does, if ever. And after all, to skeptics, unbelievers, and even to myself, the opinions of any educated, well-meaning believer or intellectual will never be good enough on its own to provide adequate answers to these questions surrounding the issue of how a loving God could allow such terrible suffering. I sometimes wonder, people who use this as the issue in support of their unbelief in God, it sounds like to me that it's not necessarily that they don't believe in God. It sounds more like they're angry at God for letting bad things happen, especially to good people. And due to their anger and then a lack of answers to their questions, they have then chosen to reject God as a result. So if you're someone who has difficulty believing in a God who would allow the world to end up like this, as we know it, and you're asking yourself these same big questions, rather than using these questions as ammunition against people who don't have difficulty believing in God, maybe direct your questions to the one that you're holding responsible. If you're wondering why God would allow something that you wouldn't allow in this world, then ask him why. Now, if you're someone who really doesn't believe in God, you may feel like it's a waste of time to ask God these questions directly. After all, if he's not there, then who will you be talking to? And why would you waste your breath, right? Well, if you want to know if God is really there, and you need the proof of his existence, then the way I see it, there's only one way to get it. You will need to be willing to face God himself and ask him for the proof you need to see to know that he's there. Sadly, and this has just been my own experience, I've encountered more people who just want to attack and ridicule people who believe in God than I've encountered real truth seekers who are actually willing to stand before God, if he's there, and ask, if you're there, then prove it to me in a way that I can't deny it. In the same way that the opinions of other believers or intellectuals or wannabe theologians won't ever be good enough for me to settle life's most difficult questions, in the same way, it's simply not good enough for unbelievers to attack or ridicule God or his followers if they're not first willing to face God himself. In my own life, The proof that I needed to see in order to believe in and give my life over to God had to come from God Himself. And it did. I came to a point in my life where I asked God, not even knowing if He was there for sure or not, to prove that He was there. I asked, God, show yourself to me in such a way that I just can't deny it. And He did. God showed up in my life in just the way I needed Him to, so that I could be absolutely convinced that God is real, that He loves me, and that He has a plan and a purpose for my life. And when that happened, I made the decision to follow Jesus, and I've walked with Him ever since, never turning back. I know that as I say this, many people are going to want to say, well, what did God do for you? What did He show you? What was the proof? And all I can tell you is that the proof is uniquely mine. Go get your own. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. If you want your own proof, you won't get it from me or anyone else. You need to go to God Himself. And again, in the nicest way possible, stop beating around the bush by debating and arguing with people who will never give you the exact answer you need. Get the answer you need from the only one who can provide it, God. You may be someone who has wrestled with or is hostile towards belief in God. And maybe it's because there's just too many unanswered questions that won't allow you to accept the idea that there is a loving God in control of all things. And if that's you, I truly feel for you, because I feel like I've been right there in that same place. I believe that your questions deserve an answer, and only God can give you the answers that you're looking for those questions. And if you're willing to consider that possibility, then all that's left is, are you willing to face God and ask Him yourself with a willingness, or at least an openness to believe that He's there and actually has an answer for you? If so, then I dare you. Today, don't let this day pass. Get alone somewhere and speak out to God with actual words and ask Him, God, if you're there, then show me in a way that I can't deny it. And you've really got nothing to lose, because if God is not there, then you're no worse off than you were before. But if, at your request, God shows up in a way that you can't deny, then will you be willing to hear what He says or accept what He shows you? The God I've come to know is loving and gracious and merciful. And I believe God has answers for you. I believe that God loves you more than you could ever know. And I believe He's been trying to get your attention for some time now, because He has a plan and a purpose for your life that is full of hope and promise. I believe this to be true because God has shown this to me in my own life. But don't take my word for it, because who am I to you? God wants to show this to you personally, if you will have the courage to give Him the chance and ask Him to show you what you need to see in order to believe. So what do you say? Are you bold and courageous enough? Yeah? Prove it.